If you give me a small bit of discretion, Cathaoirleach, and I know it's committee stage, I'll deal with all of the issues and come back to Senator O'Sullivan's amendments. But I would like to try and address these because Senator Conway-Walsh's amendments were ruled out of order, but I'm very positively disposed to the principle behind them, and I think it can help to address some of the concerns that Senator O'Sullivan has raised.
Can I say for information to the House, Senator, that they were ruled out of order because of the potential charge in the state. Standing Order 41.
Yes, no, I'm not disputing that decision, and I think it'll all come into place if you just give me a chance to elaborate on it. First of all, radon gas is killing 5 people every single week from lung cancer. It's basically, if you're diagnosed with lung cancer, it's a terminal diagnosis. I think 4% of people is all that survive after being diagnosed with lung cancer. Now, the second biggest killer of lung cancer after smoking is radon gas, and 5 deaths a week are attributed to radon gas. Now, back in 2002, a piece of legislation was brought forward to actually introduce a scheme to test and retrofit homes. There have been 15 ministers in my position since that, across many of the political parties, and this issue has not been progressed in that period of time. Labour Party, Green Party, Fine Gael, Fianna Fáil have all been in this, and the reason is because it was put into primary legislation. And coming back to Senator Conway-Walsh's point, I have delayed this legislation for 12 months to try and do exactly what you wanted in your amendments. And I was determined to ensure that we could do that. But based on the long and protracted negotiations I had with my own officials, with my own legal department, with the Office of the Attorney General, it's not possible for me to do it because, unfortunately, my predecessor put a scheme in primary legislation that is inoperable, and the only way that I can introduce a national scheme is to amend that primary legislation with another scheme. Now, the difficulty is I honestly don't know at this stage what will work and won't work in communities across the country. So to try and find out and develop a proper, robust scheme, we pinpointed 1,400 homes in Roscommon and East Galway. It's not a comprehensive list of homes, it's only a sample of people in low radon areas and high radon areas. We kept it geographically tight because we don't want contractors running the length and breadth of the country, and we want this to be turned around quite quickly. Now, it takes 3 months for the radon test kit to go in, come back, and then we have to read it. Once that is read, and once we identify the homes that require retrofitting to be carried out, we will carry out that retrofitting. Based on that, and we've done it with the Sustainable Energy Authority of Ireland, where we've taken pilot schemes, developed a robust scheme, and it is my intention, and I'm determined to roll out a national scheme that is available to everyone, the length and breadth of this country, because this is a very, very serious public health issue. It is a big demand on our health resources and on the lives and quality of lives of people. And as someone who represents a constituency that has been inflicted with this particular radon gas over a long number of years, it is something that I've raised in Dáil Éireann on numerous occasions on the opposition benches. And I, for one, am committed to actually introducing a scheme once I know how that can be structured. And I would hope that when I do that, that I can have the assistance of colleagues here in this House, that can be expedited through the House as quickly as possible and through the lower House. So, to answer your question, Senator Conway-Walsh, I'm fully supportive of the thrust of your amendment, and I am determined to introduce a piece of legislation to reflect what you've said and implement this on a national basis across the country, because this has been long-fingered for far, far too long. To answer Senator Naughten, the building regulations were changed in 1998. Since that, there isn't an issue with radon gas, or a significant issue with radon gas. There may be a situation where we have one or two isolated pockets where the radon barrier has not been put in. And we can spot check some of those premises as part of this national rollout to make sure that it is the situation that is fully complied with. Coming back to Senator O'Sullivan, look, I can understand exactly where you're coming from, because if I was sitting in your shoes, I'd be making the exact same argument here, because of the frustration that's there with the failure in any progress since this legislation was enacted in 2002. And I agree with the point that you're making, and I'm going to propose maybe a solution in relation to that. Now, specifically in relation to the amendments that are before me, right? We're opposing these amendments because it is not appropriate a function for the Environmental Protection Agency to have in primary legislation. The creation and implementation of a national radon control strategy, the NRCS, is an administrative and management issue for my department, and a multi-department, multi-agency approach to improving the awareness of and the protection from radon gas. The Environmental Protection Agency is not responsible for the formulation, adoption or delivery of the National Radon Control Strategy, and it follows that a statutory requirement to report on the implementation of the strategy, over which it has no control or responsibility, cannot be imposed. The policy function for tackling radon rests with me as Minister for Communications, Climate Action and Environment, and the Minister is directly accountable to the Oireachtas in this regard. Now, I know where you're coming from, Senator O'Sullivan, but based on the difficulty that I now find myself in because of the fact that in legislation in 2002 they actually put in a radon retrofitting scheme, which actually stops me now introducing one. By putting this provision in legislation, you're passing responsibility away from me as Minister, who is directly accountable to members here in this House and in the lower house, and passing it on to the EPA. And I am quite willing as Minister to provide a report that would be laid into the library, to come into this House, which is probably easier to do than the lower house, and take questions on the implementation of the radon strategy. And I think it's only right and proper that the Minister is held accountable for that. And it would have been useful if some of my 15 predecessors had been held accountable for the failure to implement that. And I think, one, it's not going to actually add to the delivery of this to put this into legislation and give responsibility on reporting to the EPA, because it is not responsible for the implementation of the plan. So it's only giving a broad commentary and reporting back on it. However, the Minister is responsible for the implementation of the plan, and he or she should be held accountable to this House on it. So the EPA's work on radon is, of course, a key component of the NCRS, and I would remind the Senator that the agency already reports on their work in this regard on a statutory basis under Section 51 of the Environmental Protection Act of 1992, and that those reports are laid before the House of the Oireachtas. The National Radon Control Strategy is chaired by my department, and the strategy contains recommendations on a broad range of measures aimed at reducing radon risk to people in Ireland, and these are set out in 6 thematic areas. Successful implementation of the strategy would require action from a range of government departments, public bodies and stakeholders, and the reality is, from personal experience, where you're going across a number of government departments, given responsibility for reporting to one agency where it doesn't actually have the teeth, and taking it away from the Minister, fails to ensure that this is implemented across government. There are 31 identified action points set out in the National Radon Control Strategy, and it is intended that all action points will be implemented. A total of 19 actions are complete. 3 actions will be completed with the transposition of the Basic Safety Standards Directive. 9 further actions have been commenced and will be either completed beyond the strategy end in 2018 are carried on an ongoing basis. Some of the key achievements to date include the establishment and launch of a dedicated website, www.radon.ie, the completion and rollout of targeted training courses on radon remediation for construction site staff, local authorities and contractors, the establishment of registration schemes for radon measurement services and radon remediation contractors. One of the key recommendations made by the strategy relates to financial incentives to encourage householder action on radon. I launched, as I say, a targeted radon testing and remediation survey to assess the degree of uptake of radon testing and remediation in homes in high radon areas and adjacent lower risk areas to inform the detailed design of a new nationwide financial incentive scheme. Due to the success of the work programme of the National Radon Control Strategy, I intend to establish a successor strategy on a statutory basis to continue the good work in identifying and remediating the radon where it occurs. Senator O'Sullivan has raised a particular issue regarding consultation, and I am quite happy to take that particular point up on your behalf. In relation to Amendment 2, the Government opposes this particular amendment both on principle and the detail behind it, as it is already set out in Section 7 of the Principal Act. Paragraph 1D assigns the general function to Environmental Protection Agency to advise the Government, the Minister and other Ministers of the Government on radiological safety matters relating to the transport, use, storage, maintenance, disposal of radiation sources wheresoever located. Paragraph 1C further assigns the general function to the EPA to advise Government, the Minister and other Ministers of the Government and the public on measures for the protection of individuals in the state from radiological hazards. Paragraph 1K assigns the function to the agency to provide information to the public on any matters relating to radiological safety which the agency deems fit. The function of the EPA to advise the Government, the Minister and Ministers of Government and the public on radiological safety matters is comprehensive and is not restricted by a geographic location, type or purpose of radiation source. The difficulty is that the amendments as drafted would bring no additional clarity to the functions of the agency as an advisory body. However, they may include a number of unidentified and unclear terms which may be open to legal interpretation and may in fact impede the agency in delivering its mandate. And again, I would revert back to the 2002 legislation, which actually was brought through this House with the best of intentions, but is actually now impeding me in actually introducing a scheme. And I have concerns that if these two amendments as drafted were enshrined in the legislation, they could actually impede the objective of the scheme. And I am committed, as Minister, to come back, and the Minister should report on it. It shouldn't be the EPA, because this is across government departments. So the EPA can only respond and are only accountable what's within their function, whereas the Minister is answerable both in relation to his own department and in relation to the action or failures by government in implementing this. And I think it would be wrong not to leave that accountability with the Minister. And as I say, I'm quite happy to come back and report on whatever mechanism the House deems appropriate in relation to that. And I believe the second amendment is already covered in the primary legislation, but could give rise to interpretation which may actually impede the EPA.